now do Rolf. Is there any other apologies that we need to note this morning? No, there being none, I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Emma. Thank you. All those in favour? Right. We don't have to announce that. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda, item number 2. It is as written this morning. I'm happy to move, and Councillor Moko to second. All those in favour? And declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest, colleagues?
I have an interest in an item on the public excluded agenda, which I can manage by just not participating in any debate on that particular issue if it arises.
Thank you for letting us know that, and that's been noted. And when we come to that item, you can decide how you respond. Public forum, we have none this morning, and so therefore we're moving through to confirmation of the Finance and Monitoring Committee open minutes of the 5th of December. Members, are there any matters for clarification or adjustment for correction? There is none. I'll move, and Councillor Moko to second. All those in favour? Item number 6, the Chair's report. Let me just get to that in my notes here. Page 11, team. Some opening remarks for you. Gosh, it's a wee while since I wrote it, but I'll largely take the report as read. I will draw your attention, though, to the link that's in it. I found it really helpful to be able to get that information out to the public and available for access to all of our residents, so that they've got a clear understanding about some of the technical terms that we use in our committee and across our finance portfolio. I've really focused on the public being able to easily understand and to be able to analyse for themselves the efforts of council. And so I'd like to be able to see not just what's on that link, but it augmented with other information, and maybe some nice whiz bangs that we put in from time to time. I think we also had a rates calculator, which is a really helpful way of people being able to see what the impact of rates would have on them in future, and so can make the commensurate budget constraints or budgeting assessments for themselves. So I think our comms team for being able to put that together in a really easy to understand way. Thanks for that. And for taking out all that technical jargon, that's really helpful. I'm happy to move the report, and Moko, you'll second also. Thank you, colleague. Do we have any questions from councillors? Councillor Casey Cox.
Thank you. So in the report you mention using additional measures of financial stability, including cash flow. So I just wondered, in terms of that, I'm just interested in any information around how that would, I guess, help us as governors and inform our decision making, or how you see that. Yeah. Thanks,
Councillor Anna. I've got a bit of a love-hate with balancing the books. I mean, I acknowledge that it's a really valid way for us to be able to assess whether we're living within our means. But as I've mentioned, I think it does have some limitations. I'm going to hand that over to Gary, because that's a topic that we've been exploring in our financial demystifying sessions, and something that we do need some more clarity around. So,
Thank
Gary,
you.
can I?
Yeah, absolutely. Morena, councillors. Morena.
Morena.
The balancing the books measure is an important one. I think the fact that council's identified some of the constraints in underlying accounting standards and methodologies and has created its own assessment to help it make really good decisions is great. But one of the challenges with dealing with financial performance over a long period of time when you do have annual year cut-offs is the balance between accounting transactions and cash timing. I actually think both are very valuable. If you look at the annual report accounting standards and what we have to report, even in the accounting reports we produce a statement of revenue and expenditure, and we produce a statement of cash flows. The two together probably provide the best version of looking at similar performance but from a slightly different perspective. And those two perspectives combined, I think, help you make better decisions because you're able to balance off the weaknesses of either and the strengths of either. They kind of compensate for each other in different ways. A really practical example, we correctly reflect the renewal of assets within the balancing of books measure. So making sure that we are funding the renewal of assets through capital. The challenge we have, and we've discussed in the debriefs, is where NZTA adjustments to funding rates impact negatively, if they've decreased, the balancing the books. We are able at times, based on your decisions, to adjust the capital program to offset that. But that offset, although it's a cash saving and it neutralises the impact, is not reflected in balancing the books. So by seeing both perspectives of it, you're able to kind of judge the importance of those two and using the combination make, I think, a better informed decision going forward. So we'll continue to develop how we present that and make it as efficient and simple as possible, keeping it transparent and trying to take away some of the accounting complexity behind it.
Thank you, that was very clear. I just have one more question on this topic. Just in terms of, during the long-term plan and our deliberations, we do spend a lot of time talking about OPEX and CAPEX. So one of my interests is in how this more focus on cash flow might help us to, I guess, not get so caught up in that delineation, but yeah, just do you have anything to share on that?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, the theory of accounting is that the depreciation methodology is a reflection of the need to reinvest in your capital. The challenge is it balances out quite often over a very long period of time when you're talking about infrastructure that has a long life, transportation and waters in particular. So where we put depreciation on an annual basis, the underlying cash flow can be quite different to what that depreciation looks like. I think looking at cash flow, for example, in the long-term plan, we do a 30-year infrastructure strategy. The long-term plan is a 10-year reporting cycle. I think there would be some benefits in presenting a summarised cash flow analysis on a 30-year basis so that you can see the relationship between the depreciation, accounting, profit and loss expenditure, and the cash flow requirement for the assets. Over a long period of time, they'll come back to largely the same number, but from year to year, there can be quite a lot of volatility in it.
Great. That sounds like a good summary to include in our education for the community. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, I agree, Councillor Anna, and I wonder if it's also something that we can pick up on through our demystifying finance sessions to get a little bit more understanding and so that we can plan better into future LTPs, perhaps. Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on your report in the section at the bottom, election year and public confidence, I raised my eyebrows at one of the statements in there where you said, as we head into election year, maintaining transparency and accountability in our financial decision making is more important than ever. What are you saying there? Are you saying, why just an election year?
I think actually because the public are a little bit more focused on our work and activity in election year as opposed to potentially some other times. Another time that they might be interested is our long-term plan process or maybe even I think to a lesser degree, annual plan processes. But certainly in election year, they want to be able to drill into, what the performance of council and council laws has been.
But shouldn't maintaining transparency and accountability be something that we strive for across the whole 3-year term?
Absolutely, and in my view, we do that very well. We have online all of our reports, annual reports, and these meetings are public, these agendas are published, and so all of that information is clearly available to residents. I think sometimes it's about their understanding of some of the terms and the jargon, and I addressed that in my opening.
Okay, I interpreted it as you saying we need to do this in election year in order to help us get re-elected. That's sort of how it comes. It comes across quite politically charged to me.
No, there's no intention of that, Councillor Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My question is for Gary. Gary, under the terminology of demystifying finance and some of the explanations you've given, can you just confirm, however, currently this council is continuing to borrow to pay day-to-day expenses?
I can. So within setting the long-term plan, recognising the significant inflationary impacts that had occurred kind of over the last 4 or 5 years, my understanding, having gone through the long-term plan, recognising I was not here when that was set, but my interpretation was that council chose to reflect the correction of adjusting back for those inflationary impacts that had occurred negatively over a 3-year period, to correct them over a 3-year period going forward, to minimise and spread the impact so that it wasn't felt all in 1 year, essentially spreading it over a 3-year period. In order to do that spread, you do need to fund for that period of time some of the shortfall in cash that you're not generating in revenue.
Gary, respectfully, in the last 20 years, how often have we balanced our books?
I have not done that analysis. I will be prepared to go back and do some of it. Ultimately,
maybe I could help you. In the last 20 years, we've balanced our books, I think, once. So for the last 20 years, this council has been borrowing to cover its day-to-day costs. So I'm fascinated at your narrative that this is a last 3-year issue due to inflationary pressures, etc., when in fact this is a systemic issue that's permeated this organisation for 20 years.
I imagine that there will have been periods over that 20 years where the plan was to balance, and from 1 year to the next, issues come up that mean that it doesn't on an operating basis. But what I would suggest is that the legislative requirements of a council to manage its prudence measures and report on those would imply that over that long run, on the whole, you have largely balanced your books because you are required to through that legislative period.
Okay. Madam Chair, maybe Gary could, at the next finance report, give us a previous 20-year analysis, because those of us who've been around the table a while know that we've only balanced our books, I think, on 1 or 2 occasions in 20 years. I think that would be a truer reflection in terms of this current narrative from him that this is just a 3-year issue. But maybe that could be something that you could prepare for us at the next finance meeting. Would that be possible?
Councillor, I wonder if you'd agree to that coming through the executive update that our CEO sends out to members so that they, you can all have it.
Absolutely.
Is that something that?
Yeah, look, I'm relaxed. I guess my comment to the Chief Executive would be what I would find really helpful from management is that when they give a commentary, it's not just over a limited period, it is a transparent macro view, and I would suggest, Gary, that if you look at a macro view, we've been borrowing to cover our day-to-day for the last 20 years, and we have nearly every 3-year term said we're going to balance our books, and every 3 years we haven't.
Thank you, thank you.
But I just raised that, Madam Chair, in context, because my good colleague wanted to try to raise this as just a temporary issue, where in fact...
I think...
Well, I'm just asking the question.
Yeah. I think perhaps you can keep some of that commentary for your debate, Councillor Wilson. I acknowledge the points that you've made, and it's certainly something that we can hear back from.
Gary, my last question is, there was some discussion on cash flow and how one can use cash flow, and I just want to understand what you were trying to say there. Are you trying to say that a 30-year cash flow projection could be used to try to illustrate that we have extra capacity and ability to fund other expenditure that if you purely looked on our balance sheet, we would struggle with? Is that what you're trying to say? And if you are, why?
No, I believe the benefit in looking at cash flow on a longer period, amongst other things, would help to separate the management of debt between historic investment in increasing infrastructure investment and the future investment required. So as we increase infrastructure, whether it be due to growth or due to addressing historic underinvestment, being able to isolate the cash flow associated with that, I think would be extremely useful. I also think it would help with transparency to the community on the intergenerational funding of those assets.
Right. Thank you. So as a result of that, one further question. So in light of that intergenerational asset scenario, at the heart of that then must mean how we intend to recycle our current debt. That goes to the very heart of trying to run a surplus, right? Balance your books.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you, as Head of Finance, tell me when we balance our books, will we be running a surplus? What will the quantum be? And will that start to provide some debt repayment?
The way we currently manage those, we are already generating, because of the way we separate cash between deficits and surplus allocation, we are already utilising... I understand we have a balancing the books gap, so I'm trying not to get too difficult here. We are conscious of the loans that have been applied to assets in the past, and we are balancing Treasury up and down against those. In the long term, yes, it's about the fact that we will need to identify, which is a reflection of the intergenerational rating and investment, right? We will need to identify the surpluses generated to fund the historic investment in assets that has been supported by debt, because that occurs at a point in time and the repayment occurs over the life of the asset. So the cash flow enables you to see that more clearly.
So are you saying that you are confident that you could, with the current process, be able to say, this loan that was drawn down for this capital project, clearly intergenerational, and over the 30 years, yes, we've paid that down by surpluses? I'd be fascinated, but since we're not running a surplus, have we actually ever started to pay down?
At a material level and you know, without getting too granular, I believe that can be demonstrated using the cash flow reporting methodology I'm trying to move us towards, not to replace the balancing the books, but to support it.
All right,
Because I
thank you.
think it increases transparency in that area particularly.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan, and I note that you are always at those sessions, and I asked Gary if we can have that as a discussion topic into the future. So exploring more those threads is really helpful. Thank you. Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair Maxine. Gary, I appreciate the point you made that you weren't here until quite recently, but is it your understanding that this time last year council debt was in the region of $750 million? I say that because that was when I became a councillor.
I do not have the number at my fingertips. I will pick it up and be able to come back later in the session.
Is it your understanding that council debt is currently in the region of $1.1 billion?
It is.
Right, so that represents, if my earlier figure is correct, an increase of more than 25% in 1 year. When do you think we will be repaying our debt in a significant way?
I think going into that period of looking at the investment requirements that council has identified through the long-term plan will help give some transparency on what happens with debt. I think there's a difference between recognising repaying debt from historic investment and your debt balance reducing, because you may continue to put in new investment and new expansion, which will require debt to match the intergenerational investment. I would, without doing that exercise of looking at a longer term position, I would be hesitant to say you will reduce the debt balance. I do think we will be presenting, because it would be non-sustainable to do so, that you will be repaying the debt associated with historical investment in assets.
I'm going to try to make this a question because I appreciate that there are degrees of complexity and there's good debt and bad debt. We all understand that. But are you comfortable that we're on track to start repaying the bad debt?
I am.
What sort of time frame do you think we
I think
are looking at?
your current long-term plan, which presents returning to balancing the books by year 3, enables that capacity at that point in time to start to reduce that historic debt we've taken for any operating, balancing the rating over time. Like I say, I'm very aware of the last 3 years. I would have to go back further to identify any other impacts.
My last question, you remain confident that we're on track to balance the books in year 3?
I do. We presented that position to council on the 11th of February.
Yeah, thank you. I just, we've talked about the need for transparency. There are
Thanks,
the members of the public
Councillor
watching. I want to get
Tim.
it on the record.
Thank you. I think there's also opportunities for us to be able to discuss this topic further through the meeting today, and maybe as we work through our annual plan processes as well. Thank you for that. All right, now I have Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. My question is following on from Councillor Tim and also your comments around different measures, financial measures and for tracking where council's at. Could we have a conversation around having a consistent financial measure which will inform the next LTP regarding the appropriate amount of surplus required to ensure we were recycling debt in relation to the overall life of our assets?
I believe that would be one of the key elements you would be able to extract from the cash flow we're presenting. I'm happy to, I think I understand the point you're making. I'd like to go away and think about how that would translate and whether it would provide the right level of support for your decision making. So again, I am always concerned in financial accounting of having a single measure of sustainability on an annualised basis. I do believe that to reflect the longer term sustainability, because ultimately that's the commitment, financial sustainability over time. That a mix of critical KPIs seen together is a better indicator than a single KPI in isolation.
Thank you. In that demystifying finance session that I attended, there was this, I guess it was explained to us quite in a very easy way in terms of going, okay, here's the overall life of our assets and on average, and so then from that you could say, right, this is a percentage of debt overall that our surplus should pay back to ensure we're doing that ongoing recycling of debt. So I understand, I agree in terms of having multiple measures, and that's why I'm asking, can we actually have a measure that really hones in on that to help inform how we approach the next long-term plan?
I believe that will be that measure will be transparent in the information I think we will be bringing back to you.
All right, I'll look forward to having
Stay
further
focused on it, yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions, colleagues? There being none, then let's move to debate. I'll reserve right of reply, I think. Yeah. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Bitter.
Thank you, Chair. I have to take issue with the Chair's report when it talks about the importance of transparency, accountability and responsibility. When Standard & Poor's dropped our credit rating in September, they made the following statements. Hamilton's financial management has weakened. Its capital account deficit for fiscal 2024 was one of the largest in the world. This reflects a deterioration in financial management. The Council's deficit will be much higher than peers, at about 36% of total revenue. Hamilton will deliver one of the largest deficits in the world in fiscal 2025 at 44% of total revenue. The Council has delivered exceptionally weak financial outcomes over the past 2 years. And the outlook is negative. These words were left out of Council press releases. I don't see any commitment to transparency. When our latest and much needed pedestrian crossing costs $600,000 and the breakdown shows just 1/3 of that is the actual construction cost, I don't see any accountability for the 2/3 where the residents get nothing. Responsible financial management would query the omitted line item of $51,000 for professional fees that was left out of the agenda report to councillors and uncovered by an official information request. That's twice the rate for a new house. But we also appear to be paying it 3 times in other line items, with $44,000 labelled design and $41,000 labelled internal costs. Given
Final
the public
points,
have zero
Councillor Bitter?
confidence, yes, I will finish this point, reinforcing public's view of us is exactly what we should not be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Chair, just further on from my questioning, I do have some issues with that last part of the report in regards to the statement about as we head into election year, maintaining transparency and accountability in our financial decision making is more important than ever. I just again make the point that surely transparency and accountability is in decision making should be top priority across the term, not just in election year. I also have issues with the last line where you say this year is an opportunity to reinforce public confidence in our oversight of this city's resources. Personally, I find that a little bit of a political statement because I would respectfully suggest that, to a degree, that ship has sailed. You know, our debt levels have risen significantly. We're inflicting 16 and 15% rate rises, most probably on our residents, and we've had our credit rating downgraded. So I respectfully think it might be a little bit late in election year to reinforce public confidence and our oversight of the city's finances. And I do have an issue with that statement actually being in the report. It does feel to have a whiff of political propaganda to me anyway, and I don't think it belongs in a Chair's report. Thank you.
Councillor Pike.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'll always support further information coming to Council and colleagues and remaining transparent with our public across all years to ensure our community clearly understand our current and future position. I appreciate Gary's comments today about how a long-term view is beneficial when looking at budgets. However, I'm reminded that under Section 100 of the Local Government Act, we are required by government to ensure that our operating revenues and meet our operating expenses. And currently we're at $1.1 billion in debt and are borrowing to keep the lights on. That is not sustainable nor responsible, and we as a council must realise the situation we're in and ensure we're cutting our cloth to fit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I think that it's really clear that as we look for, well, we're on track to balance the books in the next financial year, and that absolutely has to be a bottom line for our future budgets. We have all seen the result of past mistakes and I think mistakes made over many years. Councillors who have raised concerns around the issue of our deficit have also pushed for some of the lowest rates increases in the country at various times over the last few years as well. And so I think that we all, in these conversations, need to take collective responsibility. In terms of balancing books is one measure, but what's really clear is actually we need to be recycling debt and ensuring that the debt that we take on is commensurate to the life of our assets, and that we're not just continually adding to debt, but that we pay down the asset within its life. And so I would like a really strong focus on that for when we set our budgets and our work programs for the next long-term plan, and I think that discussion needs to start happening now for us to really set some clear measures there, and for it to be presented in a way that anyone picking up a finance paper can understand readily. So I look forward to having more discussions on that. I would also note that Chair's reports are often political. Our Chair, Rob Pascoe, last term also made political statements frequently. So while I acknowledge disagreement, and we always have that, I do think that Chair's reports tend to ultimately be political at times. It's up to the Chair to decide whether they want to do that or not. Thanks.
Councillor Casey Cox.
Thank you. Yeah, I just appreciate the focus that is being made on education and a wider comprehension of our financial situation, and that community education is also really important so they can engage with us effectively. In particular around how we use debt to fund intergenerational assets. It's a really important aspect of our work that I don't think our community understands as well as they might, and it's something that I think with Gary on board and the work we're doing, that will become clearer. And I look forward to the measures that are being developed around cash flow and how that will help us understand how we are paying down our historic debt. I think that's really useful. And in terms of our financial situation and our need to borrow, and pay down debt over a longer period of time. That is a critical reason why we're moving to establish the Waters CCO. And so I think that's a huge step that we're making and that councils are making throughout the country, given our challenges around funding these critical assets for our future generations. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Smoke, mirrors and the truth. Somewhere amongst all of that, there will be the truth of our financial predicament. And the reality is, for the last 20 years, we have performed very poorly when it comes to a financial measure. I do have confidence that we will, in fact, balance the books in year 3 for the first time in a very long time. So I have confidence of that. The bad news is there won't be much of a surplus. And so we'll make very little contribution to recycling debt. My opinion, and I've said it again and again, is that we should stop adding debt that is non-core for at least the next 3 years, so that we start to enable the release of growth while adding additional debt for unnecessary nice-to-haves. I have to say I become really concerned when people start talking about wanting to change some of the measures. The reality is it doesn't matter whether you take the statutory measure or whether you take our current measure, our financial performance is not at all impressive. And the optics of us talking about, well, are there other measures that we could do that may imply a better situation, gives me considerable concern, because I'm wondering if the community will start to interpret that as a group of elected members wanting to spend even more on nice-to-haves. That sort of behaviour has been at the heart of our financial predicament. The addiction to spending has to stop.
Thank you, colleagues. Any further speakers? Deputy Mayor Angela.
Gosh, electioneering's happening in this chamber quite robustly this morning, isn't it? Look, councillors will... Sorry, Councillor Taylor, what was that? Can I have my time stopped? And thank you. Yeah. Look, Councillor Wilson is correct when he says that it gives him considerable concern if we are looking for other measures. But I'm reminded that during the last LTP, which took us about 18 months, I think, as a collective group of we would be more transparent and more robust as an organisation. And we did quite a big piece of work there. So to have considerable concern now, I'm a little bit perplexed by that. I would have to argue with the phrase smoke and mirrors, because I think it suggests an attempt to conceal the truth or mislead others, and certainly not the intention behind. Councillor Thompson raised a really good point around, goodness, we've seen some very interesting Chairs reports over the years, including some colourful ones from Councillor Taylor in past councils. So I look forward to further colourful Chairs reports. But look, thank you. You know, as a chair myself, I don't actually often put in a Chairs report. I'll only do that when I have something to say. But I appreciate any chair's right to be able to, understanding orders, put a report in and highlight opinion through that report and direct our attention to parts of the agenda. So thank you.
Thanks very much. There's no more speakers, so I'll use my right of reply. The Chair's report certainly has created some thoughtful remarks, and that was the purpose of it, frankly. And I think that we can grow our committee when we have a diverse range of views, all contributing to the success of this committee and our deliberations into the future. Financial responsibility isn't just about looking at the past, frankly. It's about learning from it and making decisions for the future. Yes, we have faced challenges, and I'm the first to acknowledge that. We've had interest rate hikes, inflation increases to our depreciation, and also a credit rating downgrade. These pressures weren't faced by us alone, and focusing solely on those past decisions won't solve today's problems. Already we are in a recession, and the cost of living crisis continues to hit households hard. In this environment, financial management is more important than ever. People are struggling, and as a council, we have a duty to strike the right balance. That's why we made the decisions that we did at our annual plan. The draft of it, which will be out next month for a comment from our community. And we've supported some real change in our CE's leadership, tightening up those financial disciplines at every level of the organisation, ensuring that every dollar is spent and delivers value. Sure, balancing the books is a great measure for us to be able to use to look at our success and track where we're at, but it's not the only way, and that's why I'm supporting a better cash flow measure for us to be able to explore. Residents will make up their own minds. I'm focused on presenting a picture of both where we've been and where we are. So that's about having an informed public who understands and can interpret financial information on our website and coming out of this committee. Kia ora, colleagues. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour, just raise your hand. Against?
The motion is carried, noting that Councillor Bidder and Councillor Taylor are dissenting.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now move to item 7, the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report, and we'll welcome Ian and Kelly to the table. Kia ora, Ian. Kelly. Let me find where we're at. Before Ian starts, councillors, you'll have seen, of course, that the activity sheets have been augmented now with a second and third page in some cases. So for your full purview and analysis of our tracking to success, you'll be able to use those easily, and it augments the information that is in your report, Ian. And with that, I'll hand over to you.
Good morning, Chair Maxine. Good morning, elected members. So, here to present the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report for the 6-month period ended 31st December, and I have my trusted colleague Kelly sitting to my right, who will help contribute to the report. Look, while we're going to take the report as read, I do want to just give you a verbal overview of the main points within the report. As approved during the 24-34 LTP, the capital program as resolved could be managed as a 3-year program. This was really a decision that was piggybacked off the fact that we'd been managing the renewal and compliance program that way, and it was taking away the focus on those 1-year results, knowing that it is a large complex program, and to measure over the 3 years is probably a more prudent approach to that. However, as we now know, at the time of the adoption of the LTP, Council received the confirmation from NZTA that the subsidy we were expecting was significantly lower than what we had allowed through the LTP period, and as a result of that, very quickly Council had to take a prudent approach to how we were going to deliver the capital program and what that capital program looked like with the lower revenue. So the Council took the view not just to only review the impact on the transport program per se, but to look at the entire capital program. And in terms of that, because with the underpinning purpose that we wanted to make sure that we were not in any way doing anything that would risk breaching financial strategy in any shape or form. What that's resulted in, of course, is that the year one deferrals that we'll talk about in a minute are significantly higher than we would have otherwise expected at this time. And that simply is a reflection of that decision, just to take that prudent approach moving in, knowing until we understood the impact from the NZTA subsidy. So you'll see in the report today, we're reporting at the 6-month mark that the total deferrals, we're now reporting at 116 million in total. That is the total. It's an increase of 95.1 million over the previous report, so it's quite a significant uplift. And I just want to stress that those deferrals that we're putting on the table in front of you today are deferrals that we now have a high degree of confidence that the work will not get undertaken, and we will need that money to be moved forward into a future period. Having said that, it is a 6-month result, so it isn't the year-end position, and you'll see that we are now forecasting the year-end position to be somewhere, the deferrals to fall within a range of 140 and 170 million. As time goes on, we'll be able to provide greater confidence around that number, and I expect when we come back to you in for the April report that we will we'll be able to give you a lot more certainty over what that year-end figure is. I should note that the reason we've given you a range in there is simply because through the analysis we do, we look at each individual project we're delivering, and we do an assessment whether we've got a high confidence, medium confidence, or low confidence. So the ranges are simply to take into account a little bit of uncertainty, as you'd appreciate, but to try and give you a reasonable view of where we might end up at the year end. What we've done this time round is, if you revert to paragraph 52 within the report, we've given provided a table now that actually gives you an overview of the 3-year capital program, and not just taking that 1-year view. And you'll see clearly there that the impact on year 1 and the deferrals impacting on years 2 and 3, and start to get a feel for what that looks like in terms of that deliverability. Moving on, I'll just quickly, we'll talk about our work in progress balance. You will note in the report that assets that were deemed to be in service as at 31st December are 480 million. That is a significant increase over the previous report to this chamber. Look, that's predominantly due to all the assets within that Peacock growth sale that have come online just recently, now falling into that category, and we are working through that capitalisation process. And I can give you an update to let you know that in January we capitalised 100 million coming off that 480. That was largely the bridge at 70 mil, along with a number of other assets across the board. And I can equally give you a further update that as of yesterday we had completed analysis on another 90 million of that work in progress balance, which is currently moving through the process before it gets capitalised. So again, this remains and will continue to remain a high focus element for staff to make sure that we are getting on top of that issue. You'll note in the report added a new section under the heading of capital delivery, a little bit to just maybe try and focus on what we're doing outside the financials that we traditionally report. The specific focus there is on the private development agreements. Why is that? Look, we made a specific statement on last LTP that staff and the organisation would work with the developer community to look at innovative ways for delivering infrastructure that best serve the growth needs of the community in Hamilton. And so we are going to continue to do that going forward. I will make note that the one in there that we are bringing to your attention in the report is the Rotokauri Greenway, which was just recently signed off. You know, that's also referred to as the swale, the stormwater swale in the Rotokauri growth cell. And look, that's a great, in my opinion, innovative agreement that council's entered into, and what we're actually seeing is significant capital investment and capital development happening now that you're not going to see through our capital expenditure statement, but in fact it is capital development that's enabling growth that will eventually come onto council's books, but the developer's doing that for us now, so that's good. Moving on to the activity sheets, Chair Maxine did mention that we have reinstated page 2 of those sheets, which is really as the financial tables, just to give you a view of where those significant projects that we report on are positioned in terms of their overall financial situation. And obviously we use the green, amber and red to indicate any projects that have a risk status associated with them. The other thing we've done is with those activity sheets moving away from the old program sheets, we've lost a little bit of visibility of a renewals and compliance program that we had previously. So specifically brought out a new section within the report on renewals and compliance to give elected members of council an overview of what that situation is. And again, provided a table in that section which shows the impact of the renewal and compliance program over the 3 years. Again, tying back to that management of the program over the 3-year period. So just finally, we have identified 3 projects as having a risk attached to it. I will note that 2 of them being the Collins Road wastewater storage and Puketi 3. They're both scheduled to come to the next Infrastructure and Transport Committee on the 11th of March in PX. So I think I'll leave that at that. And I'm happy to take the report as read. Kelly, did you want to add anything?
You've taken all my thunder.
Okay. It was.
Perhaps we can rely on Kelly to answer some questions as we move through your report. Thank you. And let's go to the board for questions. And I think the first up there is Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Ian, Kelly, good morning. Just a quick question on deferrals. Just so that I'm absolutely clear, on page 14, we had projected in the 24-34 LTP for this particular year, we're in a total deferral of 50 million. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, Council resolved to make deferral allowances for year 150, year 250, year 380.
Yeah. And as of the first 6 months of this financial year to the end of December 24, we're already at 116 million in deferrals.
That is correct.
And that you're projecting with a high level of certainty that that's likely to land between 140 and 170 million in deferrals.
That is correct.
A question to Chris Allen, if I could. Chris, at the heart of most deferrals are obviously CapEx programs, and we had a robust discussion about our ability to project accurately the levels of deferrals. And I took you when you said around the 50 million, that's in our LTP. Here we are, halfway through the financial year, and we've already doubled it. And our conservative projection is that we will nearly triple it. First of all, how did we get it so wrong? Second question is, on the basis that we have been putting some of those CapEx projects in our DC model and we're not delivering it, and in theory, how are we going to manage that? And thirdly, what measures have you taken to try to project the likely increase of costs in these capital projects as a result of the delay, particularly in light of the current geopolitical environment where inflation is likely to increase?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure.
No.
What part would you like me to start with?
Yeah, look, there's a lot to unbundle there. I think I'd probably start with, and Ian indicated it, there are things outside our control. And, you know, when we developed our LTP, it was with the assumption that the transport program would be funded by NZTA. So as we know, that did not happen. That was a shock up and down the country to all councils, I think, and that was quite a significant impact for us. So those deferrals do include the revenue that we have not received from NZTA. More as important, I guess, is the local share that council have decided to spend and invest on. You are still making
decisions on those projects right now. I think you've got a meeting coming up in Infrastructure Committee where you'll decide how to spend our local share. So that's a really significant delay in our transport program and hence deferrals for things that were outside our control. If you picked up what Ian said at the time, the loss of that revenue potentially and did have a really big impact on our debt to revenue ratio, which was close to the ceiling. So we had to take a very prudent or cautious approach until we understood the ramifications on the financial strategy about progressing our capital program, because the best way to deal with the financial strategy and debt to revenue at times is to reprioritise and not do capital projects. So as an organisation, we weren't pushing our capital program really hard. We were taking a really cautious and prudent approach in case we had to slow the program right down. So that's, I guess, affected our momentum a little bit in delivering a program. We had indicated to Council prior to that, coincidentally, that we should take more of a 3-year approach to our program and not get too excited about the 1-year result, but be really interested in the 3 years. Now, in saying that, I do have to point out, and it's somewhere in the report, that the deferrals from this year into next year or year 3 are a really interesting delivery challenge in itself for delivering year 2 and 3. Probably end up with the opportunity there as well. So like deferrals of the capital program can be positive to our financial strategy, which is really challenged at the moment. So there's probably a good opportunity for everyone to get involved in that capital program in years 2 and 3.
Inflation.
I think the inflation, so that's always an issue. Like a lot of our, let me change that, probably not a lot, but we are contractually committed to a number of projects where, but are not affected by inflation. Inflation is at a lower point at the moment, so it's not like the last 3 years where inflation was really rampant. I do take your point, Councillor, that we've got a lot of global volatility at the moment, and who knows what is going to happen over the next year. So I just acknowledge your point there.
Madam Chair, just 2 quick questions on that. You'll recall we had a pretty meaningful discussion a year or so, a year and a bit ago, about NZTA and the likelihood and of a change in direction prior to the election. Yeah,
Councillor?
I was just trying to build the scene, Madam Chair, but thank you. In hindsight, do you think Council as an organisation should have taken a more cautious approach?
I think we took the right approach, and that's my own personal opinion. So with NZTA and funding, if you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't put your desires down and what you want to do into your program, you don't get that. So Council put their bid forward and the things that they wanted to do. Now and you'll see that through the reports coming up to Council and even in the published long-term plan, that it was a significant risk, and if that risk eventuated, we would deal with it by reprioritisation of our capital program. So effectively, that's what's happening, and that's what we need to do.
Right. Final question, is this the highest level of deferrals you can remember?
No, I think without looking at the numbers, and this is just going from my memory, we were delivering a quite high deferrals 5 years ago, and we put a real focus on capital delivery at the same time, our capital program was increasing quite significantly. And so from 5 years ago, our deferral situation got a lot better. So 5 years ago was, or somewhere around there, was fairly high and probably as high or maybe a little bit higher than this. But this is certainly getting up to a number which is fairly big.
Fairly big. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I did have also, just in terms of the deferrals, the question around the delivery for the next 2 financial years and the challenges that these deferrals will cause. Could we have, is the best process for us to have some further discussion as elected members on what actually out of that we prioritise for delivery? Yeah. That's a question. Sorry. Yeah.
Anyone?
I'm going to. Well, could we have it? Here we go. Could we have this come back to us as a staff action, Chair? That it's at the right time that we have a conversation as elected members on how we prioritise capital programs in light of the likely delivery challenges over years 2 and 3 of the long-term plan.
Absolutely, that can be staff action to be explored further. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a somewhat specific question, and I can take it offline if needed. But I'm interested. Could someone help me understand the Hillcrest district metering project on page? Oh, now I'm going to find this. Page
sheets.
24 of diligent in the table. With the CCO model that's currently being considered, does that and the inclusion of water meters in our draft, well, in the CCO's program, does that change in any way the need for this project?
Could I pick that one up?
Yep.
And Kelly, you jump in to correct me. The overall project is called the Hillcrest Demand Management Zone. So we have a real water supply problem in Hillcrest University area where we've got very low water pressures. So we do have a funded program over 5 years, which includes a new reservoir and a number of other actions to get to that point. So they're interrelated suite of projects to get to a position of water supply security for that whole area in the 5 years. Now, it's really challenging at the moment, and for instance, we're currently in discussions with the university about their development plans, and it is very, very reliant on delivery of this demand management zone in Hillcrest. So I would not like to see any slowdown of the suite of projects that get to that point where we've got security of water supply in Hillcrest.
Okay, thanks, Chris. It was just the number 14 million, 600 from 26-27. That seemed, what I'm hearing is that that's for a broader project. Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you for that. That's, I think that's all at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Deputy Mayor Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I'm just going to follow along from Councillor Thompson's line of questioning and thinking. With the first 3 years of the current renewals and compliance program, the budget is 394 million. The deferrals of that are only, or for this year, only 12.5 million. So actually a small portion of deferrals. The total deferrals for a capital program, however, for this current year are 95.1 million. So which is where I think Councillor Thompson was, where she was going. Would it be prudent for us, given it's actually the capital program that are causing the most financial pain here to relook at that capital program? And it might be a question for you, Chris. And if we did, given we're little over mid a financial year, how would we do that?
It's probably more a question for Gary, but my comment on that is I think it's a good action to take funneled through Gary with our entire financial strategy in mind and just what that looks like moving forward. So clearly I'm sensing a mood from elected members to relook at our capital program. We can absolutely do that. My suggestion would be to do that in the context of our financial strategy, but Gary, can I?
So I think it's always prudent in areas of volatility, and recently it's been inflationary. I think the NZTA change to the capital program highlights volatility in this period. So I do think it would be extremely prudent in the annual planning cycle to look at both what the capital program implications are for next year and beyond.
So it's possible that the suggestion is a solution.
Absolutely.
Gary, this might be I've just got a couple of other questions. Gary, this is one for you. Putting that suggestion aside as a solution, given the high level of deferrals, what specific measures, other than relooking at the capital program, could be implemented to prevent it negatively affecting I guess the capital program over the next 2 years, because we work in a three-year bucket?
I think there's a couple of critical plays in that. One, as Councillor Wilson pointed to, is we're quite conscious of the inflationary pressures that could come through the market, but also really conscious that the inflationary pressures over the last 12 months have been less than were anticipated. So I think there is some trade-off there to offset that risk that we're seeing. So we had anticipated 5% inflation on capital for the 2025 year. The December 2024 capital goods index indicates essentially zero inflation across transportation costs and 1.2 across waterways. So that will create some capacity to de-risk some of the inflationary pressures. I think we need to do some work on presenting that to you in the annual plan process. I also think working with the business units to identify the phasing of capital projects more effectively will provide increased transparency. And I think that's a reaction you have to do when you have volatility in a particular space, is you have to go slightly deeper in terms of looking at some of those things from a materiality perspective.
Gary, it wouldn't be a strategy, though, to rely on simply inflation to fix our capital program, particularly our deferrals, is it?
Not at all. I just point out that is one of the factors to be considered.
Yeah. Just a question on our capitalising of assets. We've got just over 480 million of assets currently in service. And I know that Audit New Zealand is looking at how we process our WIP, which is Women in Politics, but work in progress. So considering $480 million worth of assets currently not in service, but in service but not capitalised, are we going to achieve that by the financial year end, 31 June, whatever it is, 30 June?
I'll take that question.
Oh, thank you.
So as I mentioned, that number was largely due to bringing in the Peacock assets, which were, I think, 108, circa about 180 million adding that. So we've already capitalised the bridge. We're actively working through the remaining assets in that group, and there's literally a large team who are looking to bring that number down to an acceptable level by the 30th of June.
So that's absolutely doable?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. My final question is regarding the orange risk profile of the Puketi 3 wastewater treatment plant, the upgrade, and the Embassy Theatre open spaces. Just what specific steps are going to be taken to mitigate those risks so that both of those budgets both of those projects come on budget and in time,
So I'll take that
given they're
question.
both sort of flagged as orange?
Sure. So that's the important part there is the comments that are on the side.
Yeah.
So, so there's commercial and contractual decisions that council will be making in an upcoming meeting.
Yeah.
So that's regarding Puketi. And for the theatre, that's a third party that's undertaking that development, and we're working within their timing.
So I noticed that comment, it said not under CE's control, but I just, if you can explain that to me, because it's around $4 million of city money going for the Esplanade area, the treatment, the surrounds outside. So the city has contributed that. So why would that then not be under CE control?
So the phase of that project at present isn't under the control of the CE. We are working with the developer, and we put those components in at the appropriate stage of the development. So we can't hurry up and do our part because it may not be in the correct phase with the development. The phrase out of CE control is related to the CE's KPI and the specific wording around that KPI.
Okay, so in a nutshell, for those viewers online, yeah, it will be, yeah, that's our one viewer. So it's the 4 million to develop the Embassy Park arrival precinct. We can't do until the theatre is done, because that's, even though we've contributed as a city $25 million to the theatre, that's not our contract, under our control.
Yeah, we have to work together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So is there nothing we can do to make sure that Embassy Park is finished on time?
Well,
Or you're saying it will?
We will be finishing it on time with the appropriate stage of the development.
Yeah.
We're just saying that compared to what we had forecast in the annual plan, the project is slightly behind.
Yeah.
But all we can do is be ready.
Yeah.
And be ready to go when the appropriate stage in the development is there.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering those questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pike.
Thank you. Yeah, just further to Deputy Mayor's question on Puketi wastewater treatment plant. I just note that the comment says, Amber, due to market prices for construction being higher than estimated. I thought it was quite a favourable market at the moment for lower construction costs. And
So that matter will be brought to the council meeting at the next Infrastructure and Transport Committee, and that's on the 11th of March.
okay, I guess I'll save my further question.
Can we get any explanation?
So, what's the question?
So we can't get any comment, we'll wait till then? Is there?
Well, it's in public excluded.
Okay, yeah, happy with that.
Thank you, Councillor Pike. That satisfies your questioning. It'll be an interesting meeting, that 11th of March, Deputy Mayor. Got a lot of decisions to make there. Thank you. Just a couple of questions from me, and I'm channeling the Mayor here. You know that she always asks about renewals and compliance, and I'm referring to page 18 and 19 in there, and referring to your introductory comments, Ian, about it being a bit of a new way for us to be able to look at this and assess things. Shows that we're 30% spent in that budget for a half a year, and it seems to me those two fractions don't match up. How can we have confidence that we're on track to be able to to sort of meet our obligations in this regard.
Thank you, Chair Maxine. The one thing that will make a big difference is that the council just before Christmas agreed to establish a building renewals and construction panel.
Yes.
And so the contracts are all being signed by tomorrow, and we have a raft of works ready to go, designed, scoped, ready to issue to that panel. So that will make a big uplift, particularly in that renewals and compliance area.
Okay, thank you. That's really encouraging to hear. And I see that we've got 4 paragraphs in there. Is there the possibility that we can have just a little bit more detail? I understand that in each of those activity sheets there are lines that talk about compliance and renewals. It doesn't give us a great level of detail, and I'm just struggling with how we get to have that level of detail and where we might see that as a committee so that we can track it along.
So we can look at that, and if it's okay, we might work with you as the chair to formulate something that meets what you're looking for.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. I did have a couple of small questions about the project risks. In the water CCO, you identify that there is the potential for handover delays and potential inertia that might happen because of that. What kind of mechanisms have we got as a council as we work through that process so that we can ensure that we have the priority projects that we've identified and the timing and phasing aspects matched up with our expectation?
I'm not sure how to respond to that.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, the intent is the CCO would establish and be on line 1726. I think what we were saying with the comment is it was about risk around the portfolio, the delivery of the current capital program as it's in. I mean, in terms of prioritisation, we heard a little bit of that discussion earlier, that staff are always looking at ensuring that the right capital expenditure is done at the right time to deliver the right outcomes for the community, to ensure that that we are maintaining and supporting our waters network over both water and wastewater.
Okay, thank you. Maybe that's something that we can capture through the CCO process and our waters working group. Thank you. And the final thing I had, no, I'll leave it because I think we discussed the capital expenditure exposure through the school link, which potentially will be resolved through the March 11th Transport and Infrastructure meeting. Thank you. All right. Councillor Thompson.
I'll move if it hasn't.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Do I have a seconder? I'll second. I'll second. Thank you. And thanks, Ian and Kelly, for your fulsome answers. Appreciate that. Councillor Thompson.
Race now with Councillor Ewan for the next item. And we have some really big capital programs to deliver in year 2 and 3 following these deferrals. And those big numbers jumped out to me as a potential risk around being able to deliver all of those projects. A big part of our budget is actually renewing old infrastructure, making sure we're looking after what we've got, and also investing in waters, including addressing some of our wastewater capacity and overflow issues. And so I wouldn't want to see things like that slow down. We have a pretty dire situation in terms of wastewater capacity, which is hindering our ability to build developers' ability to build houses. So there are things in there I really wouldn't want to see slowed down. But if we're going to need to prioritise our capital program for these next couple of years and potentially push some things out to make sure that we can deliver what we intend to, then I do think it's really important there's elected member oversight over that, so that it's not just made, that decision's not just made at an operational level, but that there is full discussion over what we do prioritise as first, I guess, as things that we want to ensure we absolutely do deliver in these next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sierra. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to start off with a bouquet. There are some things that this council does very well, and we should always keep that in the context of a complex organisation. I have to say I am concerned about the level of deferrals. I have raised for many years that we needed to improve our processes, and we have seen an improvement in the last 5 years, but I'm fearful we're back to the position where we've somewhat overpromised and we're now struggling to deliver. I'm of the opinion that at the heart of that is should have been identified much earlier on, and we should have addressed it in our LTP and in our annual plan process. However, I see an opportunity, and that opportunity is actually to stop and have another really good look at what projects we do. And it certainly is my opinion that we must maintain what we've already got, and we must heavily invest in waters, simply because one of the things that I think we have failed our ratepayers in is the fact that we never really resourced critical infrastructure, and this has led to most of the city being shut down in terms of development. And I hate to say it, at times we have prioritised other nice-to-have projects in the area of transport, community facilities, ahead of what was critically needed. And we, unfortunately, now have this predicament in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any further comments, debate from the floor? No, there being none, I'll just quickly say that thank you to Ian and Kelly for the huge amount of work that goes in behind this, and the sometimes the messages aren't what we want to hear, but getting clear visibility across it and being able to make adjustments as a consequence is critical. I asked questions about our compliance and renewal because I have heard the Mayor in the past, and I think we all know and understand the consequences of falling short of our obligation in that regard. And I think we can all name examples of failures where they have happened around the city, and I see one on my ride home every day in the Aotearoa Bike Challenge 2025 at the Celebrating Age Centre, and you know we have committed nearly $400 million over the next 3 years to address this. But I ask myself, how do we ensure that we don't repeat past mistakes? I think the key is visibility, and I welcome Kelly's willingness to work with me to be able to find some balance and ways to be able to get some visibility over that. So I'm keen to understand how better visibility can improve on our proactive approach. So with that said, I'll hand back to Councillor Sierra for her right of reply.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of our capital program, what I do want to clarify is that I'm not intending on relitigating our long-term plan. We've been there, we've done all of that. The issue at hand is that we potentially can't deliver what we agreed on. If we can, and we have assurance that we can with the agreed amount of deferrals in the long-term plan, then that's fantastic. We've got lots of critical water and renewals programs in there we need to deliver. But if we can't, that's where we need to prioritise, and I do think that we have a role in that as elected members. So to clarify, this is not a full, let's open up the whole LTB and debate all over again. It's just being prudent in how we manage delivery over the next few years and making sure we just take a realistic view of it as elected members and as an organisation. Yeah.
Thank you. So that's moved and seconded. Let's put that to the vote. A show of hands is adequate. All those in favour? Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. And with that, I think we'll go to a morning tea break. Yeah. It's been a good morning of debate, so enjoy a 15-minute break, and let's be back here, let's be a bit generous, 11:15. Thank you. Quorum, we need one more. I've got governance gone in to round up the troops. So as soon as we have a quorum, we'll invite Sarah to the... Excellent. Thank you, Tim. You don't need to be sitting down to be making up our quorum. Thank you, colleagues. Now we're up to item number 8, our financial performance and strategy report, and I welcome Sarah Vaz to the table. Sarah, we missed your smiling face last December, but welcome you back to the chair and hand the meeting over to you. And just before I do, may I just say, colleagues, we are a bit pressed for time, so if we can allow our presenters to be able to get through their report and I'll be asking our most pertinent questions. That way we're able to then meet a 12:30 hard stop, which I would like this meeting to be able to do. So with that said, Sarah, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. I would like to first emphasise paragraph 53 in the report, which explains that the graphs in paragraphs 54 to 56 are an adjusted LTP position. So that means that the changes are made to the things that we know, such as deferrals, but they don't include other adjustments which you would have seen come through in the annual plan graphs that were presented on the 11th of February. This is because until the annual plan is formally adopted, the LTP is still the reference upon which we are required to report to the committee based on the terms of reference in the committee. So at this time of year, between the drafts of the annual plan and the adoptions, we do find ourselves stepping between two worlds and two different data sets for those graphs. So the financial report shows a positive balancing the books position year to date compared to the budget, with a reduction in the deficit of 9 million, and the year-end forecast is looking $4 million favourable to budget, so a 52 million deficit against a budgeted 56 million. The accounting result is showing a $10 million worse than budget year to date and forecast to be 28 million worse by year end. This is mostly driven through the $13 million reduction in NZTA capital revenue and the 15 million of interest swap losses. Drawing together the balancing the books and the accounting view, the overall operating cash performance is neutral. The NZTA subsidy cash impact has been neutralised through reduced capital spend. The lower debt position, along with the interest swap position, is managing interest costs effectively over the longer term, and there's no immediate cash impact for depreciation impacts of revaluation, although the longer term renewal costs need to be considered in the finalisation of the water services delivery plan. Revenue favourability has been achieved through strong event and destinations activities, stronger than expected consent activity, and the 10.8 million of Peacock's capital subsidies received in the current year post the completion of the associated capital program. These revenue outcomes are supporting a stronger debt to revenue ratio performance than would be achieved through solely the lower debt balances. Outside balancing the books, the final drawdown of the HIF interest-free loan recognises 0.6 million of interest-free benefit over the term of the loan as a fair value gain. The Peacock subsidy and the HIF loan revenue are a credit to the innovation of the growth and development teams whose past work has secured significant revenue and savings for the community for key growth infrastructure. I note that over time we will receive the cash gains of that interest-free loan, despite the interest expense still being recognised in our P&L. Net finance costs year to date are 400k favourable, with 2.5 mil favourability forecast by the end of the year. Budgeted interest rates are looking very, very accurate. However, the lower forecast net debt balance, which is mostly a result of the higher capital deferrals, is reducing interest costs. Other operating costs are being effectively managed, with significant ongoing cost efficiencies being achieved in the digital space. Key outstanding risks that may impact the forecast forecast year-end result include the depreciation impacts pending the final outcomes of the water value revaluations and the impacts of any other capital decisions, including any discontinuation of projects such as the bridge. Neither of these will have a cash impact, but they may impact the level of capital investment going forward in the future. With that, I'm prepared to hand over back to the Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Colleagues, I didn't mean that to be no questions, so if you've got some questions for Sarah, happy to take them now. Councillor Pike.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just trying to further understand the personnel costs. It says a material difference of 235 favourable and an annual variance of 572 unfavourable, which is 807,000 difference. I note it says it's due to casuals and extra staffing at events and destination, but do we know how many FTEs that's supplied and how long, what the long-term impacts of that will be? Are we going to...
So there's numerous things that are impacting your personnel costs in your P&L, and that includes to do with the capital program and what labour costs have been charged to the capital program. With a delay in the NZTA, there has been an impact on, you can't charge to capital when you're not working for capital, and so they end up in the P&L, so there's that impact there. There was significant vacancies earlier on in the year, but those are tracking, some of those vacancies once Future Fit was kind of finalised are being filled, but we have been tracking at over and above the vacancy factor that we factored in.
Did your questions, Councillor Pike?
Yeah, for now, thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder to councillors that you're welcome to send inquiry to Sarah outside of these meetings, should there be other matters that you want clarification on. Councillor Sarah.
In the interest of time, just have one very brief question, and that is shared services. We discussed that a little in Councillor Ewan's committee with the CCO monitoring. But that doesn't go, where, is this the right committee though for discussions around shared services more generally, including opportunities outside of CoLab, for example?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So the question is on the topic of shared services, it partly sits within Councillor Ewan's committee. Does it fully sit there and all those discussions happen there, or is part of that actually sit with this committee?
Councillor Sarah, I've had advice from governance that there's a briefing coming to councillors that will cover off both CoLab and other opportunities for shared services. So is that something that you would find helpful to be able to answer these questions?
Yeah, I can wait then.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, councillors? No? Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for your report. I'm happy to move, and Councillor Mokor will second. I'm sure that's what he was going to text me right now. Thank you, everyone. Look, I don't want to take too long in responding here, but do want to acknowledge the significant work that goes into being able to present these reports and information in it, and acknowledging also the point that Sarah raised at the introduction of her report around the balancing the books number in year 3 and the systems technicalities that happen behind the scenes in doing that. As we work through an annual plan process, we know that we're having a zero balancing the books in year 3, and that's something that we've all committed to and asked that the organisation commit to as well. And in terms of that, we've asked the organisation to cut its coat according to its cloth. I'm pretty sure the Mayor mentioned that in her annual plan debate toward the end. And so that's living within our means, but still delivering to our community. And these results show that the messages have been heard. The organisation is listening to both our community and to council, and the final outcome, financial outcomes reflect that. Our CEO's response has been very clear, and I've seen a cultural shift towards financial discipline right across the organisation into deep layers of our management. And that's very noticeable in these results when we think about the direct measures in his direct control around the $1.5 million favourable for personnel, the operating and maintenance costs of $1.2 million favourable, and administration expenses $900,000 lower than planned. They're tangible outcomes that demonstrate a commitment to financial responsibility. Beyond operational savings, though, there are a financial strategy that's also showing encouraging results. And so this is what the numbers that we should be also looking at, and it's about showing our community that we're listening and that we're acting responsibly and that we are committed to financial sustainability and that that's what's delivering for our city. Kia ora, is there any further debate? There being none, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour of receiving the report?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, colleagues. Now, item number 9, we'll invite Carmen. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Moko. And remembering, councillors, that this is a report for information at this stage. It is an interim 6-monthly report. And that said, I'll hand the meeting over to you, Carmen. You're well versed with presenting to us.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Carmen Fortin tōku ingoa, ko Kimberly Atkins tōna ingoa. So just taking the report largely as read, just as Chair Maxine has mentioned, it is a 6-monthly monitoring report for July to December 2025 on the non-financial service performance measures. This is the first time that you'll be seeing the status of some of these measures as they were developed through the 24-34 long-term plan. There are currently 4 measures which have been identified as may requiring corrective action and 1 target that is not going to be, 1 measure that will not hit the year-end target. If there's any questions on those measures or on the report, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Carmen. Colleagues, I'll also remind you that there's opportunities outside of this meeting to engage directly with Carmen for further clarity or explanation. Thank you, Carmen. Obviously a very clear report and my timing messages have got through. So thank you for that. Councillor Wilson, did you choose to debate?
Other than to say, Carmen, you always produce a very good report. Thank you, and your baking is world class.
And a seconder, I think. Did you want to endorse the baking also?
Yeah, I'm good. I missed out on the baking, but...
All right, colleagues. Let's put the receipt of that report to the vote. All those in favour and against?
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Wilson. A resolution to exclude the public, seconded by Councillor Louise. All those in favour? Against?
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. We'll just